The hidden problem with merit, when a useful word becomes a misleading idea. Make merit, accumulate merit, dedicate merit. These phrases are so familiar in Buddhist culture that most practitioners never stop to examine them. Yet an important question deserves to be asked. What exactly is merit? Is merit something that exists as a kind of invisible spiritual substance? A cosmic reward point system? A storehouse of goodness that grows every time we perform a wholesome action? Or could the word merit be pointing to something much simpler and much more profound? There's the risk of mistaking the label for the reality. One of the Buddha's recurring themes is that suffering arises when we fail to understand what our concepts and labels are actually referring to. In Itivuttaka 663, the Buddha says, open quote, beings perceive in terms of what can be designated and are established in what can be designated. Close quote. We live through names. We think through labels. We organize experience through concepts. There is nothing wrong with that. The problem begins when we mistake the label for the reality it points to. The word tree is not a tree. The word fire is not fire. Likewise, the word merit is not the process it describes. Yet many practitioners unconsciously treat merit as though it were a thing, something to collect, something to own, something to accumulate, something that belongs to me. At that moment, attention shifts away from the actual Dhamma and toward an idea. A different way to read the suttas. Try a simple experiment. The next time you encounter the word merit in a sutta, temporarily remove it. Then ask 4 questions. 1. What intention is present? 2. What action follows? 3. What conditions are strengthened or weakened? 4. What result naturally arises? You may discover that the teaching becomes more concrete, more observable, more practical, and much closer to the Buddha's method of investigation. What is actually happening when we give? Most people have heard, open quote, giving creates merit, close quote. But what is occurring in direct experience? A generous intention arises. A generous action follows. Attachment is not being reinforced. Possessiveness weakens. Sharing becomes easier. The mind experiences gladness rather than regret. Future generosity becomes more natural. The process is completely understandable without introducing the idea of a spiritual substance called merit. Nothing mysterious is required, only causes and conditions. Tash-dependent arising reveals the mechanism. The Buddha's teaching of dependent arising provides a powerful lens for understanding this. In the Mahanidana Sutta, the Buddha repeatedly asks, open quote, if this were absent, would that appear? Close quote. Again and again, the answer is, open quote, no, Bhante. Close quote. The teaching is not about things. It is about conditions, not possessions, not accumulations, not spiritual objects. Conditions. The Buddha traces suffering through a chain of causes. Feeling leads to craving. Craving leads to seeking. Seeking leads to acquisition. Acquisition leads to evaluation. Evaluation leads to desire and attachment. Attachment leads to possession. Possession leads to stinginess. Stinginess leads to guarding. Guarding leads to conflict. This is a map of how suffering grows. Now consider what happens when generosity is practiced. The process begins moving in the opposite direction. Possessiveness weakens. Stinginess weakens. Defensive guarding weakens. Fear of loss weakens. Conflict weakens. What many people call merit is often the beneficial unfolding of this wholesome causal process. The real question is not how much merit. A subtle shift occurs when merit is viewed as a possession. The practitioner begins asking, open quote, how much merit did I gain? Close quote. But this is not the question the Buddha repeatedly trains us to ask. A more useful set of questions would be, what intention was strengthened? What craving was weakened? What attachment loosened? What conditions are now present? What results are likely to follow? These questions direct attention toward dependent arising rather than spiritual bookkeeping. Why the Buddha still uses the word merit? If merit can be misunderstood, why does the Buddha use the term at all? Because it is a useful designation. Language requires shortcuts. The word health summarizes countless biological processes. The word education summarizes years of learning. The word merit summarizes wholesome causes and their beneficial consequences. The problem is not the word. The problem is reifying the word. When a designation is mistaken for an independently existing thing, understanding becomes obscured. From accumulation to cultivation, this shift changes how practice is understood. Instead of, I am accumulating merit, the focus becomes, I am cultivating causes. Instead of, I am building spiritual wealth, the focus becomes, I am weakening greed, hatred, and delusion. Instead of, I am trying to gain something, the focus becomes, I am learning what can be abandoned. This perspective aligns more closely with the Buddha's frequent emphasis on relinquishment, non-clinging, and cessation. The deepest function of merit. The Buddha did not teach generosity merely to create future rewards. He taught generosity because it weakens attachment. He did not teach virtue merely to create favorable outcomes. He taught virtue because it prevents remorse and supports clarity. He did not teach loving kindness merely to generate blessings. He taught loving kindness because it weakens ill will. When viewed this way, merit is not a spiritual currency. It is a conventional name for wholesome processes that reduce suffering and support liberation. The label remains useful, but the emphasis shifts from the label to the reality it points toward. A final reflection. The next time you hear the phrase, open quote, make merit, close quote, pause for a moment. Look beyond the words. Ask, what intention is being cultivated? What condition is being strengthened? What attachment is being weakened? What result is naturally unfolding? Those questions move us closer to the Buddha's way of seeing. Because the Dhamma is not ultimately about accumulating labels. It is about understanding causes and conditions so thoroughly that suffering no longer needs to arise. And that understanding begins when we stop staring at the signpost and start walking the path it points to.